Hello, everybody. Welcome once again to another installment of A Rebel Without Applause, coming to you as I always do from my little nutshell of infinite space, right here in the Wood of the Holly under the sign. And with me today, I've got a special guest on A Rebel Without Applause. She is a lifetime journalist. She was a senior executive at the Washington Post, at Axios, and NPR. She's written about all things political and elsewise. And she also wrote an incredible book, which I was fortunate enough to read. It's called Kuleana, the story of family, land, and legacy in old Hawaii. Welcome, Sara Kehaulani Goo. How are you?
Hey, nice to be here. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. Really enjoyed the book. And as I said to you a second ago, I feel on some small level I've adopted some of the cultural gifts that the Hawaiian Islands have afforded us, most specifically in the ocean on my surfboard. So I have a feeling for the sceptered isle, Maui, myself. You wrote this terrific book about, it starts with a land grant, actually, from King Kamehameha in 1848. And your ancestor was the beneficiary of this gift. Let's start back into that historical moment and we can inch our way forward because I think your story reveals a lot of interesting cultural and political issues and dilemmas that live with us at this very moment.
Oh, thank you, Bill. Sure, yeah. So my book, Kuleana, is really about a family land crisis, actually. And as I grew up in Southern California, but I'm part Native Hawaiian, and I grew up visiting our family land often on the island of Maui. Many people have been or heard of the Road to Hana, and my family land and my grandmother was born in Hana at the very end of that road. Most people turn around when they get to the end, but my family land is in this very remote, jungly part of the rainforest, right on the rocky shore. Beautiful, undisturbed kind of land that has been the way it has been since before foreigners ever set foot on Hawaii lands. So that's what's amazing and special about it. And I learned really not until I was an adult that this family land had been with our family for more than 175 years, back to when Hawaii was not part of the United States, but part of the Hawaiian Kingdom, of course.
Right.
My grandma had told me stories, just like how your family tells you stories you don't quite always believe. This land was, from the king, from the mountain to the sea. And she would just kind of gesture wildly, like to vast, point up to the mountains or to the volcano. But it wasn't until I started researching this book that I understood just how much land our family originally had and how much that had actually just disappeared and shrank over the course of many generations.
So King Kamehameha III, I believe, 1848. So we're about, let's see, Captain Cook arrives in what was then the Anglo name for the Sandwich Islands in like I think the 1780s or so.
Like seven, I think I pinpointed like around 1776. So,
Right.
like the time of the
Contemporaneous.
independence of the United States, yeah, we're declaring, yeah, right. So that's a one good
Right.
pinpoint.
And this kingdom uh, lasted until like 1896. Let's just get the dates right. Am I
I
right?
think 93 is the overthrow.
Okay, of
1890.
Kamehameha. So this was at a time I'm always interested in the politics of it because, in California, much of the land was originally subdivided by the king, the Spanish land grants. And in your case, in 1848, your ancestors got a big swath of what would be Eastern Maui from King Kamehameha. And the challenge of consolidating and holding on to that with everything that happened in between is sort of, I guess, the story of your journey.
It is, but it's actually not too unfamiliar if you look at other stories of how native or other tribal land across the United States was, divided or, it's basically the introduction of capitalism to as a foreign concept to indigenous people who had no idea or no understanding of even the concept of owning land.
Mhm.
So it was really about, suddenly there's a system, there's a tax system, suddenly there's a survey system to mark, where one's land begins and one ends. And suddenly you have to pay taxes and you have to, document, and pass down your land from one generation when someone dies. And so it was a whole entire system that a lot of Native Hawaiians didn't understand because it wasn't part of their culture, but one that the foreigners who really were advising the Kingdom of Hawaii at the time fully understood because they had brought it with them and imposed, and so they had set it up. So the fact that any land, frankly, in our family exists is kind of a miracle if you think about it that way. But I think that my family, was good at documentation and must have had some friends in high places to have ended up with the land that we did. But a long story short, what I was astounded to find in this book through my reporting, and this is what I kind of turned my reporting on my own family, was the king originally granted 990 acres of this land, and today about 90 acres is left in our family, and of that 90 acres, about 10 is in my grandmother's name.
Well, considering it's from 1848, that's quite an accomplishment to even have that remnant of acreage when you consider what's happened in the intervening generations with the cattle empire that was part of Maui. Jack London wrote about it in a
Yeah.
Voyage of the Snark. He takes a voyage, I think even Mark Twain. Then, of course, sugar,
Yeah.
pineapple, and the plantation interests that really, overtook Maui. And only now, I believe, with the demise of sugar, is some of that land kind of returning to its a more native state. Just as I know, as I drive towards, the area that I'm familiar with in Haiku, what was previously, just rows and rows of pineapples it's kind of feral now.
Yeah, actually, what's surprising if you go to Maui now is I'm kind of heartened to see they're actually growing crops that are actually growing for people to be consuming on the island. This
Mhm.
is amazing. 90%. I mean, the story I wanted to write part of this too is just how crazy upside down the Hawaiian economy has become. Hawaii imports 90% of its food. It used to be a wholly sustaining community that, of course, grew and provided all the food to sustain the entire population, which was believed to be, about 800,000 people. Of course, it's a lot more than that today. But imagine that now you see, of course, the cash crops are long gone on Hawaii, or at least on Maui. But they're actually growing fruit, they're growing produce, and a lot of that's for Hawaii, which is lovely to see. So this isn't only a sad story, but it is about like Hawaii, I think, is now starting to look back at the past to figure out the future. It realizes that like this is not sustainable to have 9 million people, 9 million visitors come to these islands and import 90% of its food. And, it needs to think about what actually maybe worked in the past, maybe informing what needs to happen going forward.
Well, it isn't necessarily a one-way street, history, meaning cultures can reclaim themselves, and they have in the past, famously, for better or worse, that's another debate, but the land of Israelistine, or Israel, or Palestine, the Jewish people reclaimed their ancient language and their culture, and it starts really, I think, very much with language. So, like they say in the song, the things that it ain't necessarily so. Things in the Bible, ain't liable to, we have the agency to reverse things. That's my point.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you're going there, but language to me is another important part of this story too. I wanted to also explore how Native Hawaiians are bringing their culture back, how they're fighting to bring their culture back. And I think there's something really beautiful and inspiring about that for all of us. My great grandmother was one of the last surviving people who spoke Hawaiian as her first language, who was still alive in the 1970s. She was one of only 2,000 people they believe that was still alive to speak the language. And she was part of a program where some activists, in the 70s, when the kind of like Vietnam, anti-Vietnam War movement was going and very alive and well, some, people in Hawaii, where some Native Hawaiians were also looking and saying, hey, we need to fight for our own culture. And language is something that they identified that they wanted to bring back. So they started documenting and recording all the people who are still speaking the language or able to speak the language. And in fact, I found a recording of my great grandmother as one of those projects. And they fought to get Hawaiian back into schools, which had been banned with the overthrow of the Hawaiian government and banned from being taught and banned from being spoken. And that was why my own grandmother didn't speak the language. And that's why I never learned the language. But now, fast forward in 2020, the census shows that 20,000 people now say they speak the Hawaiian language. So it is a rare story of reversal that you don't see, especially in Indigenous language, where the language has come back. And I think that's incredible and a total testament to, what happens when people fight for it and they get results. So I'm inspired by that. I think that is a story that everybody should know, and a story that I think a lot of Indigenous stories are sad stories, and I think this is one that is really positive.
Well, we also see that on the mainland with indigenous tribal people, making very powerful efforts to recover and retrieve and reintroduce their languages. So it's not absolutely unique. I was reminded when I read the books about, Eddie would go in the voyaging canoes and retrieving the lost technologies of navigation, which actually
Yeah.
were lost. How did we get here? We have no idea,
Yeah.
But they had to do some research and go back to some of these, as I recall, the small islands where elders still had some of the knowledge of how to navigate. After all,
Right.
Hawaiian people, the native Hawaiian people, were in fact themselves visitors at one time in the
Yeah, that's so true. That's
so
so true.
I was intrigued by that. I'll tell you another thing, and it's in your book, and I don't think people really understand that about the Americas and also the Hawaiian Islands, is that with first contact with white people, Europeans, it unleashed a health catastrophe that's almost unimaginable in our own time
Yeah.
in terms of the die-off.
Yeah.
And this happened it's first with the Caribbean peoples, the Caribs, and then across the larger continent, and then later
Yeah.
on the Hawaiian Islands.
Yeah, I don't think this is well known. And probably isn't surprising given the stories of Native Americans and tribes in many other parts of the world. But I don't think people know to the extent that just how huge a population loss there was at first contact, literally with the first ship of Captain Cook arrival on the Hawaiian Islands. It really decimated more than half the population within a matter of just a few decades, and it was just like wave of disease after disease, venereal disease and smallpox and measles and other communicable diseases. And there was no, and the terrible thing about it was that it also then followed like the arrival of missionaries. And so the Hawaiian people, I think, got into a mindset that I didn't really understand until I was reading more about this, that they were made to believe that their kind of way of life and their lack of faith in Christian God and their whole non-Western way of life was to blame for their huge numbers of death and disease, and why they were not protected and why they were dying in huge numbers, but foreigners and white people were not. And so it became like this terrible kind of also just kind of a mental health issue, if you will. Like I felt like, this is, inevitable. And there were all these newspaper accounts that I found that it was just like inevitable that this whole race of people were going to die off. And it just doesn't matter of when it was going to happen. And so there's all these like just guesses about like, when will the Hawaiian population die? When will the native people die out? Will it be this year? Will it be next year? It was just terrible to read this. And so I think that as someone who is part Native Hawaiian, to read it felt like, my God, I just feel like a survivor, actually, that, the fact that to be any part of this tiny population that's managed to survive is also, just you feel like just like the land that's kind of survived. It feels like a miracle that this is actually, that there are any of us, the language, all of it feels just very precious.
Right. It's a remnant population when we look at the Polynesian people in Hawaii, and similarly so with the native people on the American continent. I don't think people really get, because when the white settlers came across in their covered wagons, I mean, they had confrontation and wars with the various tribes, but essentially they were looking what they thought was an open, virgin canvas of land, when in fact the real truth was maybe 100 or 200 years before, the population, the diseases just wiped out. It left vacant the American interior, which created a false impression of virgin when in fact it was really something else, that these diseases and viruses just swept. Because even as I understand it, or as I'm coming to understand, there were cities, millions of people in the Americas, trading routes from east to west, abalone shells on the east coast of city, and all these things that have been, and the diseases just vacated so much of the land. And
Right.
so when the white settlers come, hey, look, it's virgin,
Have as much as you want. Yeah.
God has bequeathed it to us. When in fact, so which makes me kind of leap forward to the COVID moment on the islands and the restrictions that they had there, because
Yeah.
history was horrifying. It was within memory.
Yeah, it's funny because I mean, not funny, but I was actually reading a lot of this history of disease and, mass death of during this settler period during COVID. And it made perfect sense to me why people in Hawaii were so freaked out about COVID, why they really wanted to shut down every single flight. It's because they're an island, they were in their island mentality, and they had the scars of knowing that they have dealt not just with obviously the past, but previous waves of other diseases have hit the islands before. My own grandmother had tuberculosis, and I think that other terrible diseases like that were contagious, leprosy. We know the history of that, has seared in people's memories and put a lot of fear into people with good reason about what that can do on an island and how quickly that can spread. And in particularly, Hawaii has a very large elderly population, and people really value and treasure, of course, their kupuna, their elders. And so you put all those things together and you get that, real conservative reaction to COVID and wanting to protect their own. But another thing that happened, and I know we'll get there, is about tourism. I think that when you shut down those planes and the borders, if you will, around an island, what else did they learn? They learned that, wow, the coral came back, the fish came back. They had suddenly access to, they saw that their the beautiful environment that lives and thrives without 9 million other tourists coming upon it and descending upon it every day was amazing. So that was beautiful to see. And I think they started to rethink, like, what is the balance of tourism, what is right for us, and how can we rethink our approach to tourism too. Not to say they don't want tourism, but like how much is too much. I think they've started to really rethink that.
Right. I have to say I am the guilty beneficiary of some of this colonial enterprise. As I mentioned, my father's got a place in Haiku, and I couldn't even know what the ancestral history of that little plot of land is, and who lived there and farmed it. But you know, I don't know how to reconcile it because it wasn't me. Um,
No.
but I'm definitely the beneficiary of it. I got a bunch of surfboards there, and I love that ocean, and I love that culture, which is something you had to reclaim for yourself, because who the hell is pure Hawaiian? I mean, who the hell is pure anything in this world genetically? We're all a kind of genetic gumbo of sorts. And you apparently had to tease out your Hawaiian ancestry from other ancestries.
Yeah, I mean, I think Hawaii is very special, and I think it gets this, reputation as being this amazing melting pot where everything's very kumbaya. But I mean, in fact, it's more complicated than that, and you know that. We spent a lot of time there. There's, even for someone like me who is part Native Hawaiian, there's no real pecking order if you're born and raised there, if you're not, and I'm not. But I've got a lot of family there, and how haole are you? How dark skinned are you? Blah blah
Right.
blah. And so navigating that has always been tricky and complicated. I don't sound like I'm from Hawaii. I was, of course, I don't talk pidgin. But I think that was all very intimidating and uncomfortable for me to address in this. But I think the thing is, like, at the end of the day, the land is what connects me to it, my family, and really my heart. I feel like very much have always felt called and always felt like you do, connected to Hawaii. I think that there's something that it's just hard to explain, that you can't really put into words, but I feel like my soul has always it's been part of me. And that's by birth, but that's also by just the connection I feel to it. So I feel like it will always be a part of me. And I always also felt compelled from a very young age to tell the story and to get to the bottom of it, and to share it with the world. So, the journey to get there was long, but it forced me to kind of confront some of those questions for myself and for my kids. How can I go on this journey when I start from so far away? I live 5,000 miles away from Hawaii. But I'm also felt led there, and I felt connected there. And I also, my answer was to find that cultural connection and cultural practice through hula, which we can talk about, and through halal. And you don't have to. I find people who will live by some people who live on Hawaii and don't necessarily practice the culture, if you can believe that or not. So, I think, like, it's up to each individual, how they live their life and how they live with that intention.
So that cuts to a question: is what is culture, and how portable is it? Is it necessarily attached to a land grant or acreage, or is it something
Yeah.
that you can find and discover and earn a right to? And it seems to me, especially through your book, I mean, yes, it's you're navigating the bureaucracy of Maui County and taxes and previous owners and this relative and that relative. But ultimately, to me, in terms of recapturing a culture, it's kind of a sideshow, because the real show is you doing sort of the work of reclaiming language, of making the inquiry, of finding this beauty of hula, of
Mhm.
storytelling through dance. So that's sort of what I was able to take from your book, is that
Yeah.
that journey.
Oh, I'm so glad that came across. And I think that's kind of the existential question for Hawaii and Hawaiian people. Because back to where we started with the lasting impact of colonialism, Native Hawaiians are being displaced today. More of Native Hawaiians live outside of Hawaii than on Hawaiian Islands. So
Vegas. Vegas.
Vegas, they live on the Ninth Island. They live in California. They live actually in Southern California. They live in Washington State. They live in Oregon. They live in Texas. They live wherever it is less expensive to live than Hawaii, which is pretty much anywhere. And so that leaves a question of, I don't think that we have a choice. I think that if we're going to continue our culture, we have to practice it and figure out how to practice it outside of Hawaii. So that's an uncomfortable question. And I think I wrote my book kind of for two audiences. One is to raise that question among Hawaiians, and another is to kind of talk about the Hawaiian culture and the bigger narrative that we talked about for non-Hawaiians. And so, yeah, I mean, what you just raised is that big question that I don't think that is being talked enough and out loud or in bigger spaces, maybe beyond like, whisperings within certain Hawaiian households. But I think it is the existential one, because if we don't confront that and we just wish that everybody would move back, well, that's not really, I don't think, realistic, unless you're going to get deep into like the policy weeds of, affordable housing and, Oahu, which is probably another podcast. Maybe not for this one.
Right. Well, can this culture coexist with and survive with capitalism? This kind of
Yeah.
a
I mean,
question.
I don't know. I think the jury's kind of still out on that.
Yeah.
And, it's been in a couple hundred years since the overthrow. So,
Well, I think certain cultures offer us certain gifts, and there's definitely, major gifts of the Hawaiian culture. I mean, for me, I'm a jazz player. And so I feel like I'm also beneficiary of the gifts of
yeah.
African American people who bequeathed us the blues and jazz and and my skin is still pretty white, but I feel like that culture is available to me, and it maybe isn't something defined by land ownership or the color of your skin or the makeup
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
descendants.
I think that if like, look, I think like Hawaii, if any culture, like the Hawaiian people are, like aloha is a real thing, and I think that they do welcome everybody. But I think what I'm writing about is like they want that to be reciprocated. It is not a one-way street, and when they start to feel like it is like a take, it is not cool. That is not the vibe we're going for, And I think that's what I'm trying to raise. It's like when Hawaiians are giving and giving, and the not just Hawaiians, but the local people, and they aren't able to make ends meet and they can't even stay there, that's where we're at a breaking point. And I think that's really where we're at right now. I think we're at a kind of untenable situation where you have the world's billionaires, literally every billionaire can claim an island right now and has kind of claimed an island. You could just pick your island and we can talk about the billionaire that has the most land. And that is not really an even playing field or a fair, place for people who are working families to be able to have realistic expectations to own a home. Literally the data shows that 3 out of 4 households in Hawaii don't have enough money to buy a single family home. I mean, that's crazy. I know things are bad in Southern California, but this is where it's headed in Southern California. It's just like, I feel like it's like kind of following right behind.
You see it on beautiful beaches in Mexico and other places in the world where, the capitalist dollar prices out the people that have lived there
Yeah.
for generations. Talking about aloha and respect, one of the places you feel it, you can get your ass kicked, is surfing. I'm out there, we take Ho'okipa, for example.
Yeah.
That break, pavilions, that is a local proving ground for the kids that live there. And Bill's, hey, I'm in LA, I'm paddling that, I want to get my wave. Well,
I wouldn't want to be you, Bill.
fuckhead, you better wait, you better show respect, because whether you are responsible individually or not, you are at the point of the spear of a colonial enterprise. Even the fact that you're here with the local surfboard and a beat up Toyota, you're this colonial thing. So
You have to be humble.
you have to be humble and earn your right to be there in the water. It's very apparent. I mean, I've had situations where people were just really angry.
Mm-hmm.
like, you don't know how you fucking this. Oh, yay, it's all cool, bro. All good, no worries. All good, no worries. All good, no worries. All good.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
And I'm like on the Howley scale of good guys. I think I'm okay, but
Okay, I hope it wasn't one of my cousins. Sorry about that.
no. And if it was okay, because even that is an initiation. And if you can take it and smile, you go to the beach and they got their arm around you, and you've passed a certain kind of gauntlet, and there's something really beautiful about surfing in that way. And
Yeah.
you earn your right. Now, there was a word I saw in your, the little glossary there,
Uh-huh.
and the path. I want to talk to you about the path towards ho'oponopono.
Okay.
Ho'oponopono.
You heard that word before, right?
Yes and no, but to me, it's a theme that is not only important in Hawaii, but in America, and it was in South Africa, and it's going to be a big issue in Israelistine, and that is the notion of restorative justice.
Mm-hmm.
How to make we can't undo the past. I'm not personally responsible for Captain Cook and whatever happened,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but there is some obligation to try and make right. And since you've thought about this in a way for specific to Maui and Hawaii, what's your thought about that path forward? And I want to say the word again. You can say it.
Oh, ho'oponopono.
Ho'oponopono.
Yeah. I don't want to claim I'm like an expert in it, but I think it is a word that refers to a more of a process of coming of healing. It's more healing than just I think sometimes it gets shorthanded as sorry
Mhm.
or making amends. But I think it is more about healing. It's a kind of a process to come together and heal to truly move on with a goal of truly addressing an issue and healing and repairing and being able to start again. And that is more involved than like, hey, we're over it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I think that is reflective of kind of the Hawaiian approach to like it's like we all have to be good, we all have to have healed ourselves and each other. And I think that from what I understand, sometimes that involves a third party to help that happen. Maybe that's relevant in the way that you're discussing about more complicated global affairs. But other times, there's an understanding that there has to be the right time for that to happen, and there has to be each person has to be in the right place for that to happen as well. So if that's helpful to understand it, it's not a kind of oops, kind of the everyday interaction kind of thing, but refers to a bigger wound to heal. So a family kind of rift or a bigger thing to heal between two people or more than two people.
Because that's what I was thinking about, not so much on the personal, but a little bit more on the political restorative justice. It wasn't long ago where President Biden came and apologized to Native people for the schools that really were
Yes. Yeah.
culturally whitewashed them. And so what I'm thinking about is embracing that word with maybe a path forward to something that's fair than Oprah Winfrey owning Mark Zuckerberg and Larry Ellison and some of these
Yeah.
massive land grabs on these islands. What's fair?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that's another word along with Kuleana that I think like Hawaiians can teach the world, perhaps.
Right. Because there's always this tension between the collective interests of a society, a tribe, a clan, and the individual, sometimes greedy aspirations. This clash between get off my land and, well, what the hell is that? The land was a collective enterprise, not a private one. And even your family getting the land,
Yeah.
privatizing it, and when they did, what you intimated earlier, that that was something that was done with, under the auspices of, let's say, the missionaries and some of the early agricultural interests wanted to see if they can chop up this island and kind of privatize it so that they could
Right.
move in. I guess that was the plan.
Yeah, I mean the real impetus was cash crops. I mean, it was really sugar. So it was sugar, and really later the Civil War in the United States was, the South was cutting off the sugar access to the North. So that was why Hawaii got into the sugar business. Fun fact.
Interesting. And
Yeah,
of course, the South itself was fighting a war to hold on to slavery and one crop, essentially, with maybe the exception of tobacco, which was cotton.
yeah,
Wherever cotton was grown, you had misery in the world. And I think maybe sugar was.
yeah. Maybe that'll be in the next book, crops and all the wars they started. I
You
may
know,
have
it's a great book. Read it. It's by this professor. I had him a number of years ago. His name is Beckert, but it's called The Empire of Cotton. And it
Mm,
traces this commodity back into time. And of course, it explodes into a huge war in the Americas. But when you just trace cotton, it just reveals, this global system of exploitation. And I don't think sugar is that different.
okay. I'll look into that one next,
Yeah,
Bill.
well, I think sugar becomes something that teases the European palate, and then there's just a huge craze and demand for it. It wasn't something that humans had necessarily grown up with.
Yeah.
It was something, I don't know where sugar started, but uh,
Yeah.
wow, Sarah, I want to recommend this book to everybody. Kuleana. It is really a deep dive not onto your own journey to get this land. What's going on with the land today? Can you go camp there? Can you stay there? Can you visit it?
Oh, yeah.
Is Uncle Take's
Actually,
house still there?
oh, yeah. Okay. So actually, I'm going to be there in August. So I'm going back. The land is still I don't feel like I should give away any spoilers, but the land is still in our family.
Uh-huh.
The land is still there. I think we're still figuring out what we want to do with it, or if we want to do anything with it. Do we want to build a little holly there? We're debating whether that's something that we want to do. But Hana, I love Hana. It's very special. I'm taking my book there to share and have a little talk story event with the Hana community.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to that. It feels like bringing my book home. So Uncle Taki's house is still there. Some relatives still live there, and I've still got a lot of. You can visit my cousin Tia's food truck still there, so you can check it out. And yeah, I've still got a lot of family on Maui. I'm excited to see.
And
So
you're doing better with the drive.
I'm doing better with the drive. I can definitely drive to Hana with no problem, but I have to drive. I cannot sit in the passenger
Because
seat.
I know you get the car sick. Because
Yeah.
when you drive there, you can tell who's local because they're just
I
zooming by you. And I'm like, well, you just, yeah, I'm sorry, go. Yeah, bro, yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you're doing better on the drive.
oh,
Geez, Sarah, I want to thank you for joining me on A Rebel Without Applause, and congratulations on, this book. A quick question. You're a journalist. You've been at the Washington Post. You were there for some of our more tumultuous time, including 9/11. And, it's a big journey from the wilds and black sand beaches of Hana to the, wars in Washington. Uh, that was also a big part of your life, and obviously still is, I guess.
it is, yes. A very different world, but one that really attracted me because I love telling stories. I love history in the making, and it's been fun to be part of this crazy Washington world. And it's certainly changed a lot since I've been here. Washington itself, I mean. And yeah, it's been nice also to take a break and just focus on this book though the last several months. So, but yeah, ask me anything. Is there something you want to talk about with Washington?
Well, you were at the Washington Post, the home of Ben Bradley and Woodward and Bernstein. I will say this, folks, a couple things. If you want to preserve free speech, speak freely. If you want to embrace journalism, which we need to sustain a democracy, which is under assault, hey, subscribe to a few papers. I'm subscribing for the LA Times, Washington Post, I read this morning, and the New York Times. This is my little morning triptych. That's where I get so many ideas for this. As a matter of fact, I saw an article, I think, somewhere about your piece in one of those. Might have been your op-ed or a review. I'm not quite sure now where I saw it. But I said, I want to talk to her. It's Maui. But you've lived in those newsrooms,
Yes.
and I guess you have not been there since the arrival of 47 with 34, and it should have been more. By that I mean the felon in chief, 47th president, 34 felonies, otherwise known as the PVP, Putin's vice president. So I guess
Oh, wow. I hadn't heard that.
yeah, because I wrote it.
Oh, okay.
These are my little things. So we've seen an assault, a legal assault, lawsuits on journalism. Even was it, what did I read? Was the Wall Street Journal is being sued? Was it Wall Street Journal or the
Trump did
Murdoch?
the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah,
Yes.
Rupert Murdoch's Wall Street Journal.
Yeah.
Yeah, over the Epstein whatever.
Yes.
I mean, what's your reaction to all this?
I think it is a scary time. I think not so much the lawsuits are scary for sure. I think what's also scary also is just that the media companies are not really fighting them. I think there's a lot of deal making going on. That's what's really surprising, actually. And I think it's a combination of both a decline in trust from the audiences that used to trust some of these bigger institutions. And also, the combative nature in which, not just, I think, the administration, but a lot of other litigious organizations and public figures are going after news organizations. And so it requires news organizations to have a big legal strategy and have big dollars in order to defend themselves. And it's for independent journalists. Also, it makes it harder for them to defend themselves. So like every institution that's kind of got its back up against the wall, so does journalism, both, financially and in terms of testing the limits of, what our Constitution truly protects. And as we know, what truly protects us are the people and what they will fight for. It's not, it's not just a piece of paper. I mean, it is in a way, but like it's the people who stand behind it. And I think that as someone who's been here a long time, we've taken a lot of these things for granted. And so it's upon us to earn back that trust of people that we've lost it with, and explain the job of journalism better, and who we're really doing this job for, which is you. So those are really uphill battles. I wish I could be more optimistic about the profession that I'm in, but that's kind of the state of play.
Well, sometimes what's needed is a simple word. It's called courage.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen in other moments in history where there was a failure of courage. I also think there's kind of a space for what I'm doing, because I don't have a broadcast license that I have to, submit to the FCC. I don't really have. I'm doing this in a corner of my apartment, so I'm not really at risk. Although someone could knock on my door and guess what, Bill? Congratulations, you just won a one-way trip to Alligator Alcatraz for a little vacation, or El Salvador. So there's risk in a way that I never had anticipated. One, as a comedian, two, now as I'm doing this. So yeah, I think courage.
Yeah.
Counts, and I appreciate you, Sara Kehaulani Goo. And a word to the wise: check out the book. Take a trip without the plane flight to the Garden Isle of Maui. You will not get car sick on your ride to Hana. I guarantee it. It's really a good book. So, gee whiz, I don't know. Thanks for, hanging with me on a rebel without applause.
Oh, thank you. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Stay with me on the other side to say goodbye. But to everybody else out there, namaste, shalom, and aloha. By that I mean namasaloha. Till next time, see ya.